Generally speaking, when a film production descends upon an existing location with their cast, crew, props and whatnot, the expectation is they'll leave the place as they found it, allowing general life to return to normal. But for better or worse, this often isn't the case. Whatever the reason, this is a mail from What Culture with 10 movies that left behind crazy things on film sets. Number 10. Heat. The crew of Michael Mann's iconic crime epic Heat left behind a rather grim surprise for the future owners of an apartment which was used as the home of criminal Trejo. Trejo is killed in the third act of the movie, sorry for spoilers, bleeding to death on the floor of his apartment after being tortured. And when more recent owners of the abode watched Heat after learning it had been filmed there, they decided to pull up the very same carpet where the death scene was shot. To their surprise and hopefully perverse amusement rather than abject terror, they discovered the still present residue of the fake blood which had soaked through from the carpet to the floorboards underneath. Despite Heat's mighty $60 million budget, the film's cleanup crew apparently skimped on the finer details. Number 9. Star Wars: A New Hope. A New Hope's Tatooine scenes were filmed in Tunisia, where the unforgiving natural elements resulted in an infamously hellish shoot. Though the crew altered many existing structures to create Tatooine, they also built entirely new buildings in the Tunisian desert. Surely most famously the iconic domed Lars homestead where Luke Skywalker grew up. After George Lucas completed several weeks of shooting in the country, the production packed up and flew to London for the next leg of filming, while leaving the Lars homestead entirely intact. The structure understandably deteriorated amid the harsh conditions of the region. Though when Lucas returned there to shoot Tatooine scenes for prequel Attack of the Clones in 2000, the production rebuilt the dilapidated dome from scratch. Once again, the Lars home was left up standing where the shoot was completed, and in 2012, a group of fans travelled to the site to restore the fixture, which had once again fallen into unavoidable decrepitude. May the force be with all of them. Number 8. Hannah. Cult classic action thriller Hannah is a visually stunning piece of work, thanks to both its crackling action choreography and memorably off-kilter production design. And a few who've seen the film are likely to forget the amusement park tunnel which opens out of the gigantic wolf's head. It's a fitting image considering that the film is effectively a dark contemporary fairy tale, and we even see the big bad wolf of the story, the evil Marissa Viegler, played by Cate Blanchett, emerging out of it. The wolf's head wasn't present at the Berlin shooting location, a former amusement park called Spree Park, and so director Joe Wright tasked his longtime production designer Sarah Greenwood with creating the prop. Hilariously though, when shooting was completed, the crew didn't dismantle or even remove the wolf's head. A fan returned to the location more than 2 years later and it was still there. I bet they were howling. I'll get my coat. Number 7. The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes. Stories of lost props don't get much more ridiculous or amazing than this. Billy Wilder's 1970 film The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes features a sequence involving the Loch Ness Monster, and so a 30-foot Nessie prop was created to execute the scene, which was to be filmed on the actual banks of Loch Ness. However, Wilder ultimately decided that he didn't like the prop creature's humps, and insisted that they would be removed, despite warnings that doing so would make the prop less buoyant while shooting in the water. Unsurprisingly, this caused the model to topple over and sink to the bottom of Loch Ness during shooting. With the crew unable to retrieve it, it simply sat on the bottom of the loch untouched for a whole 47 years. To complete the scene, Wilder moved shooting to a studio with an entirely new Nessie prop. In 2016, Norwegian company Kongsberg Maritime conducted an underwater survey of Loch Ness using robots, and their imaging scan showed what is very clearly the soggy Nessie model resting in the loch's depths. However, seemingly no attempt has been made to rescue it to date. Someone call Mr. Burns. Number 6. The Abyss. James Cameron's masterful sci-fi classic The Abyss largely unfolds on an underwater drilling platform known as Deep Core, with principal photography taking place at Cherokee Nuclear Power Plant, an incomplete power plant which was converted into a film studio. The power plant turned studio ended up hosting 2 sets, a smaller one for miniatures and the main deep core set, which was flooded with 7.5 million gallons of water in order to fill 55 feet of space and sell that the platform was indeed deep underwater. Given that the cast had to receive decompression treatment after spending so much time on this set, presumably they were pretty convinced by it too. Though the power plant was technically a movie studio which could be repurposed for other productions, Fox never did anything with it after Cameron shot there, leaving the set untouched for almost 20 years, as Fox apparently didn't want to spend the cash to take it apart. Fans often visited the site and posted pictures of the still standing deep core structures until they were finally demolished in 2007. Number 5. Pitch Black. The original Riddick movie Pitch Black was partially shot in the South Australian outback mining town of Coober Pedy, which had previously served as a shooting location for Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. As explained by Pitch Black producer Tom Engelman, the shoot needed a unique environment that looked more desolate and dangerous than Mars, and Coober Pedy evidently fit the bill. When the production upped sticks and left the town, local business owners reportedly bought the life-size prop of the Hunter-Gratzner transport spaceship and then decided to park it right next to their store in the middle of town. Today, the Hunter-Gratzner is still embedded in a pile of dirt more than 20 years after the film was shot there. Though unlike most of the entries on this list, at least some sort of quasi-formal arrangement was made for the prop to be left behind. Great work, Cooper Pedy. Number 4. The Ten Commandments. Cecil B. DeMille's 1923 religious epic The Ten Commandments was one of the most ambitious films of its era, making plentiful use of California's vast Guadalupe-Napomo dunes to double as the Egyptian desert. 1,600 tradesfolk helped construct elaborate sets on the dunes, which included 4 35-foot pharaoh statues, 21 sphinxes, and 110-foot-tall gates, all of which was rumoured to have been blown up and buried in the sand after production was wrapped. However, in 2012, archaeologists working in the area discovered one of the Sphinx heads, and in the years that followed, attempts were made to excavate the surrounding areas in the hope of discovering the entire buried set. A documentary, The Lost City of Cecil B. DeMille, was even made about the find, and in 2017, a second Sphinx head was discovered. This seems to confirm that the set wasn't destroyed by a demolition job, but more likely broken and buried by weather conditions and the natural shifting of the dunes. As for why DeMille never transported the props away from the dunes, it's been theorized that it may have been too expensive to move and store them elsewhere, and maybe the fact that they're massive. Number 3. Big Fish. Tim Burton's terrific 2003 fantasy dramedy Big Fish unfolds with the mythological town of Spectre, and though to the untrained eye it seems like the production simply invaded an existing podunk town for the shoot, Spectre was indeed created entirely from scratch by the crew. The Spectre scenes were filmed on Millbrook, Alabama's Jackson Lake Island, where an entire town's worth of buildings were created. Once shooting was completed, the landowners allowed the film crew to leave everything as it was, and almost 2 decades later, Spectre lives on as an eerie ghost town of sorts. Though Spectre looks rather different today, several buildings were destroyed by fires or environmental wear and tear. It's still a popular tourist attraction, with the owners charging just $3 to explore the area. Visitors are prohibited from entering any of the remaining buildings though, because they were only used for exterior shots during filming and therefore weren't constructed in line with interior safety regulations. Hilariously, many visitors have thrown shoes over the town's telegraph line in honour of the same distinctive visual from the film. Number 2. Redwood. You may not have heard of 2017's low-budget horror film Redwood, but it nevertheless lays claim to one of the most awesome abandoned prop stories in horror movie history. The film was shot in Poland and features a memorable sequence set inside a mausoleum with a demonic statue. The statue was placed inside the mausoleum specifically for the shoot by the prop department, and when filming was completed, the sculpture was left inside the building. But because the mausoleum is a public venue, the statue was predictably repeatedly vandalized before reportedly being destroyed entirely. It's a shame because that's one hell of a prop for a low-budget horror movie, and it fit the vibe of that location perfectly. This is why we can't have nice things. Number 1. The Hills Have Eyes. Alexandre Ajar's 2006 remake of The Hills Have Eyes may have been set in New Mexico, but it was actually filmed in Morocco, in the dusty Ouarzazate province to be precise. Early in the film, the heroes stop at a gas station diner and are given a shortcut through the hills, setting the rest of the movie's grisly events in motion. The gas station and the diner may seem like totally real places of business which were hired out for the shoot, but they were actually entirely purpose-built for the film. When the crew departed the location, the set was left standing, and so it still is today, with rusty cars outside the gas station and tins of food in the diner. Reportedly, many tourists driving through the area even stop by the gas station looking to fill up, only to be surprised that it's just a hollow shell. Just as well the residents weren't in, guys.